Hello everyone, Mike Levin, April 26, 2016, around 6:20 p.m. or so. I guess it's one of my first times shooting one of these videos leaving work as opposed to heading into the office. And I am sort of on the high of a very successful day. It is as good of a day as yesterday was frustrating and bad. And it comes down to trying to do development work on Windows. I install Cygwin, which is a way of turning a Windows machine into a nearly standard Unix machine. They claim and tout that it's POSIX compliant, but apparently POSIX compliancy doesn't determine where things are located on the hard drive. And with this Cygwin product, essentially there's a lot of mappings between where Unix and Linux like to find things and where they actually reside on your Windows machine. And there's huge differences between the two platforms, such as Windows using backslashes in paths and Unix using forward slashes. Not to mention the actual directory structure itself and the purpose of those locations. And Cygwin has this strategy of cutting you off from everything and selectively mapping things back in with something that I guess is the equivalent of a FS tab mount points under Unix is what it would be the equivalent of. And usually you can get work done in this environment. It's actually pretty nice. I enjoy typing in it. In their terminal. It's the Minty terminal, so it's Minty under Cygwin, but it uses the Xterm colors, and when I'm in Vim, it's just a wonderful, pleasurable environment. And most of the things you can install under, say, Python, for example, install really easily with the pip install or easy install systems, and you're golden. The problem occurs when what you're installing is not native Python and it has some compiled components, or it has to interact with native system resources that follow a slightly different model on Windows than they do on Unix. So my job was to connect to a database through a database connector. On Windows, I'm using a JDBC connector, which is modeled after the older Microsoft ODBC way of connecting to databases. It's, a port and a protocol, all that sort of happy stuff, so that you can run a piece of software on your desktop that connects to and queries and pulls back data from a database that's somewhere else in the company or in the world. So JDBC is the Java version of this. And in order for it to work, the software you're using it with typically is Java software. In this case, it's SQL Workbench/J, which is the equivalent of Query Analyzer for anyone familiar with SQL Server. It's just a little box you type into and you hit execute, and your queries execute and you get back the results. So that's what I was using on the Windows desktop with the JDBC driver. So the time had come to do some automation. Naturally, I turned to Python, and the trick is to get Python to connect to this same database. It can either go through the JDBC driver that's provided by Amazon to connect to Redshft, or I could find some other set of drivers, perhaps from a Python package. So it turns out that it's very similar. The database I'm connecting to, Amazon Redshft, is very similar to Postgres, the free and open source database I talked about earlier, but an Amazon version so that it can run in the cloud as database clusters and provide private connection back to the person buying the service from Amazon. And that private connection is fairly locked down. This is enterprise corporate data, so they don't just let you connect to it willy-nilly, so they provide the connection to the company, and the company in turn provides it out to its employees usually only on the local area network of the company or through virtual private networking if you need to get to it elsewhere. So that's a long way of saying I didn't have really many options of how to connect to this thing other than through the JDBC connection. And there's two popular ways in the free and open source community to do this particular trick. It's either using the PSYCOP G2, I guess it's SYCOP G2 package, which has compiled parts in it, and I do believe replaces the JDBC driver and connects directly to the port using the protocols. There's a lot of work in there. And when you install it, because it's, you know, compiled binary components in there, it recompiles those parts, plops it on your machine optimized for your hardware, and Python starts using that. When you're on a platform where all that dependency chain stuff can be resolved and all those compiles can actually occur and all the resulting files can be put in the right spot, which doesn't exactly happen easily under Cygwin. So I tried switching from the Cygwin version of Python, because Cygwin is like a whole software repository. When you install it, you choose all the things like, you know, Vim and Git and Python that you want to be there in your Unix environment, so you don't have to worry about getting them and compiling and installing them later. However, if the software you're trying to use is not one of those things, you're on your own. And if one of those things has a long, complicated dependency chain, including invoking the GCC compiler to compile some C code and to plop it somewhere, things can go wrong. So I tried to get a little more mainstream on Windows. So instead of the Cygwin version of Python, I went and I got the one from python.org, which has its own way of doing things and its own mappings. And I tried installing SYCOP G2 for there, and it seemed to compile, it seemed to be where it needed to be, but it still threw errors when I tried to use it. And I tried 2 or 3 more variations before I just went down to the development team and said, hey, how do you guys do this? And they're like, what? It's not a problem. They're all on Macs. And I'm like, well, I'm on Windows. And one of my coworkers said, well, just run it in a virtual machine. So this was all still yesterday. This was the frustration part. I downloaded VirtualBox, which I almost never use because I'm a VMware person on the Mac. But my main computer at work is a PC. So I downloaded VirtualBox, I installed Ubuntu, and I had to leave yesterday before I got to the very end of Proof Positive. I did this morning install SQL Workbench/J, not to be confused with MySQL Workbench, whole different product. I installed that first, thinking that I had Workbench/J, but I installed the Java Query Analyzer tool. It worked, which was pretty amazing in its own right, using the same JDBC driver that Amazon provided. And then I installed SYCOP G2, and it worked. apt-get install, just went and did it, and then I did the hello world test in the interactive command line console. I actually typed in the connection strings, typed in my select statement, bam, I had got back a set of results against the Amazon Redshft database. So that was success assured. And that was at the beginning of the day this morning, which I had to all wrap up and put aside and not actually do the automation work, but success assured. I had that moment like in the Wright brothers and Kitty Hawk at the wind tunnel when they knew that the lift outweighed the weight of the device. So I went back to the thing that I had slated for my work today, which is a whole bunch of detective work about why something was happening with such and such a site. Ended up doing all that. in PowerPoint as far as presenting my findings. Got it in just in time within the business day. I believe the stakeholders are going to be happy with my findings. It was different than the common wisdom people were banting about. And I go in tomorrow on project number 3 that my slate is pretty much cleared off for, and my mind is pretty much ready for. Still haven't done the bit of automation work that I'm meaning to get to automate these reports that I seem to have been working on forever. But everything is falling into place. The critical parts I didn't know about the automation project are now known and successful and ready to go. The detective work I did today was very satisfying. I found things that I think were not obvious to the others who looked at it so far. Not that it was terribly hidden, it just took taking a good deep look. And then tomorrow is touching some pieces that are really kind of the heart and soul of the properties here. It's going to be my first stab at increasing the total size of the search traffic pie that's up for grabs with some very light touch work. So anyway, I'm going to head out in the subway now, and thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.